All right, so it is 7:03. I think Ivan might be pulling up a slide deck, but we can get started with introductions. Thank you all for being here today. If you didn't know it already, today is Rare Disease Day. So the goal of Rare Disease Day is to raise awareness among professionals and the public about rare diseases and their impact on patients' lives, as well as the lives of all who are affected. 72% of rare diseases are genetic, and one of those diseases is CADASIL. Since genetic testing for CADASIL was not available until the year 2000, many cases were misdiagnosed as multiple sclerosis, Alzheimer's disease, or other neurodegenerative diseases. Many physicians and neurologists are still not familiar with this disease. So we need to continue to educate ourselves, spread awareness, and support one another. A diagnosis of CADASIL for you or a loved one could lead to many questions, thoughts, and concerns. And we want to help create a space where people can feel comfortable asking questions, feel a sense of community, and most of all, feel heard. Please join us in the journey of advocacy and the fight to improve the quality of life for all persons living with a rare disease. We would like to share the story of three incredible individuals who are diagnosed with CADASIL that live their life with an admirable perseverance and determination. Please allow us to introduce our three speakers today. We have Laura participating at the UCLA site, June is participating at the Columbia University site, and BJ, who is coming from the University of Wisconsin-Madison site. Please feel free to enter questions in the chat throughout the course of the webinar. These will only be seen by the host and will be answered at the end of the session. And if they are directed towards one of our lovely speakers, we'll kind of make sure that they get that. And at the end, we'll have some time to do a Q&A session. So June, if you want to kick us off, we're excited to hear your story.
Sure. Thank you. 8 years ago, I was diagnosed with a rare, incurable genetic disease called CADASIL, for which there is currently no treatment. Today, I have a few words to share about my rare disease journey and some thoughts about maintaining a positive outlook. And part one of this journey is getting to the diagnosis, because for me, the discovery process was the longest and most difficult phase of the journey. Um, Many years ago, I was a single mother raising my two young sons, and I experienced some memory gaps and some odd physical symptoms. So I spoke to my doctor about it, but he immediately dismissed it as stress. As time went on, the symptoms intensified, and I discussed them with a different physician who took it more seriously. She referred me to a neurologist who believed my MRIs indicated multiple sclerosis. And for roughly the next 10 years or so, I saw quite a few neurologists who agreed with the diagnosis of MS, but nobody actually treated me for it. And eventually, found my way to a teaching hospital, Mount Sinai Medical Center in New York City, where I met a wonderful MS doctor who said, I'd like to test you for something. And that test confirmed the Notch3 mutation, so a diagnosis of CADASIL. Even though that wasn't exactly good news, it was actually a huge relief to finally know what I was dealing with. And of course, I was so grateful to this doctor who was just so knowledgeable and perceptive to be aware of this rare disease. And actually, she was my neurologist for the next 8 years. I could not have had a more wonderful doctor. She was so caring, and it really took the edge off the stress of living with a difficult illness. Um, there was no known history of CADASIL in my family. Um, Nobody was known to have strokes. And of course, nobody knows exactly how this is going to play out. Um, my children were adults by the time I was diagnosed. And so we all understand that this is likely to impact them one way or another, but they still have their whole lives ahead of them. I don't want this to limit them. So I decided I want to be a strong example for them as I live with CADASIL. It's really important to me that they see me as living healthfully, staying as active as possible, having a positive attitude, planning responsibly, contributing to my community. So essentially, I try to demonstrate a strong quality of life so that they don't live in fear of their future. And yeah, there are complications, and there are likely to be more. But I am here, and I appreciate that every day. There's a lot to be grateful for. I don't take anything for granted. Part two of this journey is about becoming stronger and healthier. Um, Adapting to CADASIL required me to make some lifestyle changes. Among other challenges, I was struggling with frequent, very painful migraines. I ended up leaving work, a long career, um, to preserve my health and safety. And I applied for disability with the support and encouragement of my doctor. Um, Not being able to work full time felt like a setback. Fortunately, as part of long-term planning for my family, years prior, I had purchased a long-term disability insurance policy through my job. Um, it turned out my CADASIL diagnosis did not qualify me for Social Security disability, which I learned was not uncommon for rare diseases. Um, Other people may have different outcomes. But with the help of an attorney, I was able to gain a benefit from my personal long-term disability insurance policy that I had purchased through work. Um, and more good news was that changing my lifestyle um, did reduce the frequency of my migraines, and it also gave me the time to focus on building even stronger health habits. Um, so my more flexible schedule, for example, allowed me to take advantage of options such as open water swimming almost daily in the summer at a small beach in my community. Um, Continue swimming indoors the rest of the year at our town pool. Um, so eventually, several years after my diagnosis, just a couple of weeks before the birth of my first grandchild, I had a CADASIL stroke. Um, the scariest part for me is that more than anything, I wanted to spare my family of worry and possibly grief if the outcome was worse. Because just as my son and daughter-in-law were about to welcome a precious baby girl. Uh, but after an overnight stay in the hospital, I was able to walk and climb stairs unassisted, so I was cleared to return home. My right leg was quite numb for several months afterwards. I went to physical therapy, but I felt like swimming was the exercise that really helped me most. And continuing to swim almost daily, I did regain sensation in that leg and strength. Um, so, who knows? I was able to walk out of the hospital, return to my own house, and I am very thankful for that recovery. Um, and I guess part three of this journey is about looking ahead. As soon as I learned about the opportunity to participate in CADASIL research, I signed up. And my older son, a University of Wisconsin at Madison alum, made an appointment to see Dr. Sarah Paulson to learn more about her work when he happened to be in town visiting. And he assured me when he came back to New York that if anyone is going to get to the bottom of this, it's Dr. Paulson. Soon after this, soon after that, I learned that Dr. Fanny Elahi established the Elahi Lab at Mount Sinai in New York, where I was a patient. And so she launched a study funded by a grant from the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative. Both research projects, Dr. Paulson's run out of Madison, Dr. Lahi's run out of New York, um, are staffed by stellar teams, including the research coordinators who make sure everything goes so smoothly for the study participants. I was also able to attend the patient investigator meeting last year outside of Chicago, um, June 24th, I guess, in 2023. And so many thanks to Cure CADASIL President Bert Kasiska and Chief Scientist Jane Gunther, who was the former president of Cure CADASIL, and all the volunteers who coordinated everything. Every presentation given at that meeting is available for viewing on the Cure CADASIL website. And I will say that the scientists, the doctors, the researchers who attended provided a perspective that I felt was life-changing for CADASIL patients and families. I mean, if you need a reason to feel hopeful about the future for CADASIL, watch those briefings on cadasil.org about the groundbreaking work that these extraordinary professionals are doing. We could not be in better hands. And that said, in order to achieve a successful end result to the research, as many of us as possible need to participate, including more genetically related family members, diagnosed or not, in the studies. The Cure CADASIL website has details about enrolling. So, all in all, I'll say, it's very easy to say, well, we can't control what happens in life. We can only control how we handle it. Certainly having an accurate diagnosis, knowing what we're dealing with, is the first step to handling it. And, we can't rely on good luck to have favorable outcomes. But we can, perhaps, take whatever steps are possible to become stronger, to optimize our health, and to think positively for the benefit of ourselves as well as our loved ones. Look, CADASIL families cannot predict how we'll be affected by this disease, but Dr. Paulson, Dr. Lahi, and others are doing brilliant work that holds great promise for the future. And, meanwhile, we can take it a day at a time. We can participate in the research. We can encourage our family members to join the studies with us. And we can be positive role models, if we can manage it. I hope that sharing a few thoughts about my CADASIL journey has provided some helpful insights. And I wish everyone who sees this the very, very best.
Thank you so much for sharing, June. So we're going to answer questions towards the end of the webinar. So if it's all right, Laura, do you want to start sharing a bit about your story?
So my story, like June, we have a lot of parallels, but a lot of differences. So I'm sharing my CADASIL journey. And I was a dancer and a gymnast, and I played the piano. I raised 3 daughters by myself. I worked for New York State government in Albany for 20 years. Then I moved from Albany, New York to Southern California and worked for a private software company. And I worked for the VP of the company. And I told her, I can do another 20 years here. I'm young. Well, at 50 years old, I had a neurological event that took my life and changed it. So I have to share first that my mother was a teacher. So she and my father had celebrated 45 years of marriage. I was their only daughter, their baby girl. She waited 8 years between my two older brothers and I. My mother was my best friend growing up. I talked to her every day when I had each one of my children. I still miss her every day. And as a Christian, I know I'll see her again in heaven. She is an angel. She never saw anything bad about anybody, and she could always see the positive in everybody. She sang in a church choir. My dad did too. He's in heaven. But I was a single mother with 3 daughters. And at the time when my mother was retiring to take care of my father, who had a massive heart attack, he decided he was going to go to Florida to have my brother take care of him. Well, I moved my mother in with me. So at 54 years old, my mother came and lived with my 3 daughters and I. For 10 years, she would live with my 3 daughters and I. I would put my daughters on the bus to go to school, and I put on my mother in a disabled bus to go to adult daycare. Because my mother was misdiagnosed with Alzheimer's. So I didn't know this at the time. I didn't know that was a genetic disease. So it wasn't until I turned 50, exactly 50. I turned 50 a month before, and I had my first neurological event. And that's what I call it because I had no idea what it was. So initially I had a migraine with auras, and I've had several of those, where I'd have to be in a dark room, no noise, lay flat because it would make me nauseous. But then my hands started to feel heavy and I couldn't get rid of the pain. And then when I started walking, I felt like I was drunk. I don't drink, but I could see how other people, like my balance was really off. So I called up the ER and they said, "Do you need to go in?" Well, being that I worked in human resources, I'm like, I'm not going to go to the ER. It's $250 copay. But I did. I eventually went to the emergency room. And when it's a Friday night on the river in Laughlin, and they said, "Oh, we don't have any doctors here. Let's Skype with a neurologist." So they Skyped with the neurologist and they said, "Oh, we think you have lupus." I'm like, "What's lupus?" I'm searching on my phone. And then they said, "No, we think you have MS." So I said, "Okay." I'm trying to search, trying to get a hold of my daughters because I had one in the military and one in Southern California and one in New York. So we're trying to figure out what's happening. Well, they decide now that they need to transport me by ambulance to the closest neurological hospital, which was in Vegas. I was from Southern California. I thought they'd take me back there, but they didn't. Well, on the way there, I had my neurological event. I woke up unable to walk, talk, move at all. I was in a hospital bed on a stretcher in ICU, and I heard gibberish coming out of my mouth. Now, as a Christian, I'm like, okay, what's going on? I raised my 3 daughters by myself. I took care of my mother. She was already in heaven. And I said, what is going on? So my daughter from California came, and she was there with me taking notes in ICU. I had no idea what was going on. I couldn't sit up. I couldn't move. The only hand I could move was my right hand, which is still the only hand I can do. I was there for a long time, trapped in my own body, not being able to talk or walk. My work, thankfully, I had a really good job, and they were able to transport me by ambulance back to Loma Linda University Medical Center, where I spent several months in a stroke rehab facility. I lived there. I had PT, speech, OT, everything. My oldest daughter had a master's degree in speech pathology, but here I couldn't sit up and I still couldn't talk. So it took so many misdiagnoses. I had to write them down: MS, lupus, stroke. They thought I had a hole in my heart. They thought I had other diseases. They couldn't figure out what left me unable to walk or talk. And it took several years and several surgeries and several doctors. And I had several, over 10 at that time, and 2 years, Well, finally, my neurologist at Loma Linda said, hey, can we do another blood test? I said, sure. I've had every blood test. I've had a heart monitor. I've had everything. When he called me back, he said, call your family. So I called my daughters and I said, I have a rare genetic brain disease. I'm like, well, what's that? So they gave me the word CADASIL. Well, for CADASIL to hear that, it was exactly 2 years later for that diagnosis. And then I started to learn. And it wasn't until, and my neurologist was Dr. Trong at Loma Linda. Then I had to figure out, okay, what is CADASIL? What does it mean? So I actually went to a ULF conference and I met Janet Mills, and she was our biggest advocate for CADASIL. She was the president. She and her sister and Ann McGinnis, her daughter Michelle, and other people that had leukonephrocephaly diseases, but I learned about CADASIL. And that's when I became aware in 2015 on what it is, and I joined the website. There's a Facebook page for CADASILians, for people who have CADASIL. There's another one for CADASIL support. There's another one for people who don't know about CADASIL. So I had to say that my mother, because she was misdiagnosed Alzheimer's disease and she was only 54, she had no idea who I was. My mother had 2 major strokes and several TIAs while she lived with my 3 daughters and I in Albany, New York. And I remember asking her, I said, Mom, who am I? And she would say, oh, you and those tricky questions, but I know you take good care of me. My daughters each had their own name. My middle daughter was the girl with the bird because she had birds and iguanas, and my other daughter. But the bottom line, my mother always said when my daughters would say, Grandma, who's your favorite? She would always say, you are, to each one of them. So my mother's body looked the same. I got her hair done. I got her manicure, pedicure, and she looked like my mother, except for her brain was gone. She had checked out of her beautiful body. So I said I didn't know that CADASIL was a dominant gene. So when I did the Notch 3 through Athena Diagnostics and I found out that I had the Notch 3 genetic disease, it was from my mother, my beautiful heavenly mother, who had given this to her baby. And I know she would never in the world ever want me to have this genetic disease. So I had to turn around. I had to turn my life around because I am on full disability. I am completely disabled. I was not able to go back to work at 50 years old. I tried, but when you're doing a human resources job and you're back to work and you can't walk and you can't talk and I'm in a wheelchair, it was a struggle. So now, 10 years later, here I am. I'm 60. I'm still learning about my new body and my new life. I'll never be able to walk without assistance. My complete left side, exactly left side, is hemiparesis. So from my head to my toe, I can't move. So it looks like I can move, but remember, my oldest daughter was a speech pathologist. So I learned how to do all the patikas. And I do it in the mirror so I can see exactly what I'm doing. So we have to remember that even though I'm hemiparesis from left side, this diagnosis and life change has opened my life for new adventures. I said, so the minute I got my diagnosis and my life changed, I called my 3 daughters and I said, are your passports up to date? They're like, yeah. I said, okay, we're going to Sweden. So we went to Stockholm, Sweden. And yes, it was different. I was in a wheelchair. My daughters had to push me. But it was a new different, and I still had to enjoy life to the fullest because we're all terminal. Whether a Christian, not a Christian, we're all only here for the here and the now. So I have to say, after my trip to Sweden, I always tell my daughters 5 years later, I'm like, hey, let's go to Jamaica. So it's a mother-daughter trip. And we continue to find the joys in life. my three daughters and I, my middle daughter of my 60th birthday said, Mom, I'm taking you to Crete, Greece. And she took me to Greece in an all-inclusive. How fabulous is that to be able to fly from New York cross country to Athens and then have to take another plane to Crete? She took me on a side-by-side ride. She took me all over the place because she is my pride and joy as well as my other two daughters. So again, like June says, we're all only here now. I don't want my daughters to live in fear. They're all adults now. They have their lives. And I said, you know what? Had I known, would I have not had my three beautiful daughters? They are the joys of my life. So we have to all enjoy everything, the here, the now. What do you have right now? So I decided when I went to the ULF conference that I wanted to be part of a study as well. So my first study was at UC San Francisco with Dr. Fanny Elijah. She was there. And I went there and I said, use me as a sample. I have CADASIL. My brain works. My body does not. My body has had over 25 surgeries in 10 years. I don't blame it on CADASIL. I don't know what it is. But I said, my brain works. My mother's brain didn't work. I can tell my daughters what I've done. I can tell them where I've been. I can remember things. And I just say, share, use whatever I can. So they did my spinal fluids. They do brain MRIs. They do eye vision tests. They do blood labs. So again, I can say I may not be able to play the piano with two hands every day. I may not have balance. I might not have agility. I certainly can't walk in a straight line, so I'll never be a gymnast again. But I am a survivor, and I want to show the positiveness how I still go to PT. I still go to OT because I want to do things like June said. I would love to swim, but unfortunately with insurance, especially being 60, I'm not, I'm on disability insurance, and I have my work, former work helps with that as well. But I can't go to aquatherapy because it's not covered. So I still say I have three precious daughters. They mean the world to me. I would do anything for my daughters. They're all adults now. But again, as anybody who has children, they are the perfect. So we're only promised for the here and the now. We can't change yesterday. We can't change the past. We can't predict the future. But we can enjoy the moment. Every moment consider as your last. Had I known at 50 years old I would have a neurological event that was genetic that would change my life forever, I didn't know. So I have to say, I also still am very part of my church. I do big brothers, big sisters. I have a little sister. I have a friend that I take to her son is 11. I take him to the movies because that gives me joy of my children. My mother and I, we were the gang of girls. It was the five of us. My three daughters, my mother and I. I've also done a mission trip to Mexico. People said, you can't go, you're disabled. I said, I can go. And I did. And I helped those people. So I just keep on going. And I have to say, it's taken me over 55 years to find a partner. So I have a partner, Robert, who's a retired Marine. And I told him when I first met him, I said, I have a lot of baggage. I said, I'm disabled. I have three adult daughters. I have a German Shepherd service dog, and I have three kitties. He said, I just want to enjoy you. He said, I was a Marine. He said, I live for the here and now. I've done all sorts of things. So he said, let's enjoy together. So do you know, Robert ended up, our first date, we went to Texas Roadhouse, and he had to cut my meat. I said, well, it just starts there. So he's had to learn from my moodiness, my tiredness, my crying, all my therapies and my disabilities. But I have to say, he's even part of the CADASIL study now. So at Mount Sinai in New York City, Harrison Chan, He's doing the same testing for my partner, Robert. He's doing the blood test. He's doing the Link app. And because I've been doing it for probably 7 years, I'm pretty good at it. So when I see him doing the Link app, which is a brain game, I know when he's doing it wrong, but I don't tell him. And you know what? He shares in private stuff that he notices changes in me. He's got awareness. Yes, he has life challenges too. He has a daughter, but we all just enjoy life. And because of the last few years that we've been together, we just got back from a 3-week cruise to Hawaii. Yes, I took my scooter. He had to learn several different things about me that I didn't want him to know when we're on a cruise ship because life doesn't work the way I want to. But you know what? We had a blast and we keep enjoying. So I have to say that we have to have hope. We each have a different CADASIL story, and this is what we need to do is share. I have to say I have several friends that have CADASIL. And because we all have different journeys, like June and BJ now have different journeys, but these are all CADASIL friends. We have all different journeys, but you know, it's nice to know that we share this genetic disease. Not that we have to share it, but we do. It's part of our life and it's part of our challenge, and we're all different. So I have to thank Dr. Fina Elijah, Jane Poulson, and, you know, Ivan and Jenna, everybody who's worked on this, because when I went to UCLA a few months ago, I told them, use me again, test me. So I went to UCLA. They paid for Robert and I to go do all of our testing there. And what a wonderful opportunity. So I invite anybody who's CADASIL, my cousins, my family, anybody who's genetically related or not. If you know you have a genetic disease or a chance of, go see help, because the only way we're going to find a cure is if we all go together. So thank you for sharing my CADASIL journey. And it's here and now. I'm 60 now. Who knows what the next adventure is going to begin. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Laura, for sharing. I really appreciate you sharing your story. And now, BJ, if you want to finish us, that would be great.
Wonderful. Well, hello everyone, and thank you for joining us tonight and learning about our stories. For background, I am 44 years old. I am married at 14 years, and we have 3 boys, 12, 10, and 7. So my adventures really are still just beginning. My background in life is my wife and I, own a couple different businesses that work with adults with special needs in a day service format. We have some different residential. Um, I'm a big member within the Lions Club organization and loving to serve our different communities. But where I'm most passionate is I am visually impaired. I have retinitis pigmentosa and became a motivational, inspirational speaker. And I travel all over to help educate and coach families who are going through visual changes. But that's not what we're here to talk about tonight. About a year and a half ago, I received a text from my sister, who is about a year and a half older than me, and I am the youngest of 5 siblings. And that text told us that she had a stroke. It was a lot to take in at the time, trying to figure out if she was okay and what we could do for her family, and thinking about all the different things within the family within that instance of that text message. We thought about our dad instantly because he had what we found out later was CADASIL, but his first stroke was more than 20 years ago. And being 24 or 44 years old right now, that was roughly in my early 20s. And I didn't really think much about it. And I'll be honest with you, I did not have a very good relationship with my dad. So I did not pay much attention to it. But I saw and interacted with him at times and saw him go through all his different trials uh, throughout his life, and he's no longer with us. But he had several major strokes. One of the things that we always saw was hand tremors from him, and outside of the other, not being able to speak and uh, being in a nursing home at a very early age. But again, I didn't have that relationship with him, but I saw my two sisters helping assist him all the time. One of the things that we learned through his family is that many of his brothers and sisters also had strokes. So we as a family always just kind of knew that we were basically destined to have some health problems. And in the back of our mind, we all expected it to happen, never expecting it to happen so early. So when we received that text that my sister had her stroke, it really started putting things into perspective. Now, having a challenge of a vision impairment causes me to have to fight for basically everything I've wanted to achieve throughout time. I was trying to work in a corporate setting, and that did not work for me. I grew up around farming and wanted to be a farmer, and that didn't work for me. Anything that I've done and wanted to do throughout time, I have had to fight and scratch and claw for every single inch. Now, with this new journey that happened for my sister, she stumbled upon this CADASIL study. And like I had said, we all expected to have those problems someday down the road, but never thought it was going to happen so quickly. Well, she found the study and was accepted into the program and asked us to participate with her in anything to do for our family. We are always there for each other to help each other, and whether it's gaining knowledge or just having an understanding. So my two of my other siblings went and did it, and the first person that came back, she was negative. And then my brother went through and he was negative for CADASIL, which was really quite shocking because we just all expected that we were going to all have this, but yet now we know all of us did not. Well, then it was my turn. I did the testing. I went into Madison, uh, got my genetics testing, back in Green Bay about a year ago, and I found out that I was positive for CADASIL. And this really was tough for the family because they felt that my deck of cards was already stacked against me because of my retinitis pigmentosa. But at the same time, I've been dealing with challenges throughout my entire life. So why not add one more thing onto my tray? I don't know how I'll handle this over time. Like our other two speakers tonight, I have not had a stroke. I have not had any signs showing to me. I do have some hand tremors at times, but it really is just part of normal day life. But all through these years, we've been preparing and having that kind of monster in the closet of whether or not this is going to be something that we're going to have to deal with. In fact, because of our businesses and different things, we just always wanted to make sure. So one of the things that we did was we have life insurance policies, not only for myself and my wife, but we even have them for our kids because just in case, God forbid, down the road, something happens that they'll be covered and be able to help if something ever happens. It sounds morbid to have life insurance for your children, but when you live that life of fear leading all up to this, it was the way to cope and how to understand and help at least lay a foundation, knowing that you're fighting for every inch. Well, after I received my uh, genetics testing and the fact that I tested positive, and I told my family, they were quite upset that I was going to have to deal with this next thing. And one of the things that I admire most about the sister who's just above me, I said about a year and a half older than me, is the way that she's always handled everything. And throughout our days, we've been able to kind of partner along with each other on many different things. I always tell her I remember the times when the older siblings, because they're a bit older than us, we were the last two on the farm, and we would spend the time in the barn listening to Michael Jackson and doing all sorts of dance moves. We've done many things together throughout time. So why not be the fitting partnership that if there was somebody that was going to test positive for CADASIL, why not be the two of us? So I'm excited to be able to support her and she to support me and our families to support us throughout going down this path. But to me, it's all about preparing. Now, in fact, we just recently told our children that we've known for about a year now that um, we're going to be having these things to deal with the time to come. But with my children being so young, we didn't really know how they would understand it. The 12-year-old, I'm sure, is processing, and the 10-year-old is trying to figure out what it truly is. And the 7-year-old, when we told him, said, "Can I go watch TV?" Well, sure. But they now know, and they'll have that time to prepare going forward in life. For me, it's about the understanding and the ability to be able to learn what is to come. Now, when you look at the numbers are certainly quite scary. 80% of the people by 50 years old are going to have a stroke, and 90% of the people by 60 years old are going to have a stroke. And the current death rate, when you look on Google, which we all know Google is 100% accurate, is age 64. But when you think about those numbers, that's because they're all being determined based off of the people who have had CADASIL passed away from it, and there aren't a lot of people being tested. Well, when you think about that, 64 is a starting point. Knowing how to be healthier and be active in life and do the different brain games and having those teasers, but just living life, it's part of the journey. So I say to myself, well, what are we going to do? First, make some health changes. Since the time of the diagnosis and truly understanding what it was, I've lost 25 pounds just by eating healthier and being more active and wanting to make sure that I'm there and doing everything possible because there is no cure. There is no cure. But as we prepare and plan, we can help lengthen that time. So first goal, make it past 64. Second goal, make it to 70. But the most important goal is every single day to be there for my children. Go back to the point of not having a great relationship with my father. I want to make sure that my boys understand that I may not be able to fix this, but to be there each and every single day for them, all the way to whatever that final day is, that I am going to fight every single day to know that I am here to be there for them and to be a part of their basketball games, whether I can see them or understand them, it doesn't matter. Whether I'm going to be here for their families in the future, that they know that when this total time is over, that I 100% gave everything I possibly can. And I think down the road, that will give my children the confidence to know that, yes, something most likely is going to happen. But if dad is fighting for us, then down the road, we're going to fight for him. Well, I think to myself, it is absolutely a great time to be a visually impaired person. Because of technology, it's so much easier to be that blind person today. Thinking about CADASIL, if you're going to be diagnosed, probably a pretty good time to be diagnosed because of the movement that's out there and the people learning and understanding and the Cure CADASIL. All sorts of different people are really starting to get focused on this to help understand and learn. And that education is knowledge, and that education will help those people move forward in life. My motto is the journey is just as important as the destination. And I truly feel that my destination is about to be a long one. But the journey between now and when that final day is, I'm going to fight like hell, make sure that my kids know that they are loved, appreciate every moment with my wife, love my family, and just know that we are all here for each other Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, BJ, for sharing your story, and for you, Laura and June, for all sharing. We are incredibly thankful for your, vulnerability. We do have some questions if you guys are comfortable answering. Um, the first one, just going to do it in the order of you speaking and kind of go in kind of rounds. June, somebody asked if they were curious to know if your son has been tested, if either of your sons.
Um, we've decided as a family, and my sons decided independently, that they don't want to find out if they have the disease, partly because there's nothing that can be done about it at the moment. And so and with my encouragement, but it was their decisions, um, want to live their lives and be unencumbered by concerns about that. So they're living healthfully and are wonderful men and um, are loving sons, but have decided not to find out whether they have CADASIL.
Thank you for sharing, June. Um, Next one. For Laura, what is some advice you'd give to someone who has recently developed a new mobility issue and staying optimistic as you have?
It's a challenge, when you go from a walker to a wheelchair to now a mobility scooter, but you find new ways. It's everywhere I go, even to the movies when I take my little sister, my little sis, or my friends. I can't get into the restroom a lot of times because with my scooter, it's hard to get around. And, even just general places and walking, the whole world is not flat. So even trying to roll over in bed or from my stomach to my back, I still have those challenges. So it's an ongoing life learning curve.
Thank you. BJ, before your first question, I do want to let you know we got in the chat some proud of you, BJ. Love your two sisters who are watching and listening. So just wanted to let you know that. Do you have any tips for breaking the news to young children and helping them process that?
Yeah, well, it took a long time to really think about that strategy. Again, my kids at this moment are 12, 10, and 7. And when we sat down with them, we went through many different things. We were determining whether we were going to go in front of a therapist so that we could, have an extra set of eyes, knowing that I would not be able to see their facial reactions. Just having my wife have an extra set of eyes, and then we decided to not do that. And then we decided, well, we'll tell our neighbor. Um, she's a pastor, and to just have her aware so that if the kids ever have any comments or questions, that they would have a resource, an outlet to talk that are not mom and dad. But in the end, we decided that uh, we just called a small family meeting, and we went down or sat in front of them, and kind of talked about the different things that were going on within health and life. And we told them uh, about how grandpa, who passed away before my oldest was born, and he had known a little bit about um, how he died, but not necessarily the details because of the strokes. But we just talked about how their aunt was had this occurrence, and she's doing okay. So if it's going to happen, these are the types of things that you might see. But know that no matter what happens, people are going to be there to support them. And if they have questions, that they have that safe space to ask questions, whether it's to you directly or to a close friend or relative. because we just need to make sure that our children, if they have questions, know that they have full access to be able to ask anybody so they become comfortable with it.
Thank you. June, somebody asked, what type of lifestyle changes did you have to make because of CADASIL besides what you've already kind of described?
Um, well, in addition to being more mindful about healthy living, I mean, I was mindful in terms of nutrition and healthy foods and diets and whatnot, but a couple of things, and of course, not working full time in my job and career, that took adjustment. Um, but I've slowed down a little bit now. So um, I understand, my balance is not the greatest. I am more thoughtful about not tripping, taking it slow. I don't run up and down stairs. So that's one thing. So being mindful about health, safety. Um, I feel now that I have less day-to-day work-life pressure, um, that I am enjoying the people around me much more. I would say that despite um, adjusting to CADASIL. I think I have a happier life. I enjoy the people around me more. I'm much more active in my community, volunteering, leading teams. And so, in some ways, my quality of life has broadened and gotten stronger. Um, but I don't think slowing down and being more physically aware and careful is a bad thing at all. It's part of actually normal aging anyway. So those are some top of mind thoughts.
Thank you. Um, Laura, next for you. Um, what is the one thing that you want the audience to think or feel as a result of this conversation?
I want everybody who's sharing to know that we only have the here and the now. So enjoy every day to your fullest. You have to love every day and be happy because tomorrow is not known for anybody. So it's a journey. We all have our life journey. So just continue every day. And if you have CADASIL or not, we all have different stories.
Thank you. And um, what is one, BJ, for you? What is one question about CADASIL that you thought would be asked that wasn't?
Hmm. That
That's
is
a
an
tricky one.
that
So,
is a tricky one. Well, here is the interesting thing. My 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 sister, uh, she has her doctorate, and I call her Doctor Sister all the time. And um, she's the researcher. I am the go with the flow. Um, and and so I've done my research by listening to YouTube and doing some Google searches. And so I really have very little knowledge now, or at this point, for truly what I'm getting into. I think the biggest thing that not having a stroke um, is how is that moment, how are we going to prepare for that moment, right? We don't know if it's going to happen in a minute from now, and we don't know if it's going to happen in 10 minutes from now or 10 years from now. But there is a chance that people with CADASIL aren't going to have any episodes whatsoever. So I think the question to ask is, what are you doing to prepare? And for me, listening to my sister, which I know is difficult at times being her little brother, but for the most part, is just having that understanding that if you're waiting for the episode to happen, you will freeze in life. And if you let it happen, whether it happens or not, will allow you to live that life of freedom. So I think the preparedness is the biggest question of how are you going to prepare?
Thank you. I did want to let you guys know that there was a comment in the chat. June, Lauren, BJ, so grateful to all of you for sharing your stories. Each one of you are an inspiration. Keep going. And then in the last minute or so, I do want to ask one question, and kind of to all three of you. And I do apologize if there was some questions left unanswered, whether or not, time restrictions, and also some of the questions may not be able to quite be answered by uh, the folks on this end or our presenters. So my last question is going to be, what is lacking in the CADASIL community? What are some ideas on educating the medical field that you guys have? So whoever would like to start, if anyone.
Uh, I
Go
can take
ahead,
a swing.
BJ.
I can take a swing for the first one. When I met my neurologist for the first moment, um, my question after the MRI and everything was, okay, if and I couldn't see my scan, but my wife was with me, and so she was able to see the scan, and she's, I mean, that's a whole nother seminar of spouses dealing with someone with CADASIL. And a question that really brought her mind to ease was, well, if this is his brain scan now, show me a level 10 versus a level 0. What should a normal brain look like? What should a person who has something extremely severe, so I get a grasp on what to do. And I think that if there's more details out there like that, um, to give somebody something to hold on to, because like when my neurologist told me, she goes, well, if I had to give you a number, which is a very unscientific number, uh, I'm a 3 out of the 10. We're all going to have white matter on our brains at some point in time in our life. But based on my age and this time frame, this is a 10 and this is a 0 and you're at a 3. And it was like the glue that just stuck to my wife's heart of, okay, it could still happen tomorrow, but he's not a 9. And that gives us hope that we have time. And I think having more open dialogue like that would really be important.
Thank you. June or Laura?
So I would say the one thing for me is I have my own patient advocacy cards, and I tell my doctors and everybody I know, I have CADASIL, cerebral autosomal dominant neuropathy, subcortical, infrared, and leukoencephalopathy. And it has a diagnosis code. So when I go to my doctors, I said it's an ICD-CM code of 187.50. And I tell them, now you can see research because it has a code like cancer, MS, lupus. CADASIL has a diagnosis code. And so we worked really hard. The whole Cure CADASIL group worked hard to get a diagnosis code. So I think that's important to share, to tell people, hey, this is not as rare as you think.
Thank you. And June, do you want to close us out?
Yeah, just two quick things. Um, when we talk about education within the medical community, when I had my stroke, I had to go to a hospital emergency room to get an MRI, and it was quite a well-known and very well-respected hospital. And the neurologist who came in to let me know that the MRIs revealed a stroke, and I had told him coming in because I was fully cognizant, hadn't lost any of that. Told him I was diagnosed with CADASIL, and he sort of mocked it and said, "Well, it's the name already tells you what it is." But then he prescribed a um, a medication that is really contraindicated. It should not have been prescribed for me, and so I do think we need to do more educating and outreach because he acted as if he understood what to do, and in fact did something that was potentially harmful. Although everybody else at that hospital was wonderful, that was an example of where we need to educate more within the profession. And I would also say one thing that would be helpful, or would have been helpful for me, and still could be, is more opportunity, whether it's support groups or other forums for CADASIL, people diagnosed with CADASIL to interact. Do I am a member on the various Facebook groups and whatnot, but I feel like there's more that we can share with each other. And so I'm really grateful to have gotten acquainted with Laura and BJ today, especially. Um, so we're all ambassadors for each other. And to the wonderful researchers, thank you so much for all the great work you're doing. Thank you to all the wonderful people who are doing more to get us to a point where our children, as one of my sons says, at some point, hopefully in the very near future, it'll be an inconvenience, not a life outcome in the end.
Thank you so much. So now with concluding this, we will have a webinar next month as well, where we'll be talking a little bit more about the genetics behind CADASIL. We'll
Hmm?
share details once they're ready. Please, once you're leaving this webinar, we do have a feedback survey, and then also we do plan on sending you an email that you registered with about kind of future webinar topics we may be interested in. And so with that, thank you guys so much. I hope everyone enjoyed this experience, and we're really grateful for all three of your stories and being willing to share your vulnerability.
Thank you, Megan.
Thank you.
Very much. Have a
Thanks.
good.
Have a good night.
Bye.